Good afternoon. This is Allison Dunn with Deliberate Directions. I am your business coach, and this afternoon we have the opportunity to be speaking with Amanda Boelyn. She is our Chicago-based CEO of She Did It Her Way. So, Amanda, tell us a little bit about your company.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be able to go on someone else's platform because I know it's so near and dear to everyone's heart and the listeners or the watchers in this case as well. So where do I even begin? So I'm originally from Iowa and I grew up there, went to University of Iowa, and I worked in corporate for 2 years before I took what I call the ultimate leap and had kind of dipped my toes into entrepreneurship as a full-time freelancer. So I was a 1099 experiencing the taste of that. And then probably back in 2015, I started a podcast, which really didn't have any sort of formal plan of what I wanted to do with it. It was more of a hobby simply because I was traveling every single week and living out of a suitcase. And I just really wanted to carve out kind of my own thing. And then from there, so She Did It Her Way podcast really grew and took off. And it's now where it's at today in terms of now I do coaching, especially kind of in the online space, but specifically helping women take what they do in their corporate job and basically transition that into what I sort of did when I left corporate. I took my skill set and I became this freelance facilitator where I worked with large companies doing sales training, leadership development, things like that. So then now through She Did It Her Way, I teach women to do that. We have the podcast. I do an annual event every year. There's so much more we could dive into, but I'll leave it at that because there's a lot more.
So what motivated you to originally kind of launch the company She Did It Her Way?
I think I just knew what my journey was when I was in corporate. And so I graduated in 2010. I had a finance degree, and then I had an entrepreneurship certificate, which I always performed really well in the entrepreneurial classes because it was more of a hands-on and it wasn't a test taking class. So I loved wanting to build things and be creative for something bigger than myself. And I worked in corporate at Target in the stores for about a year after college in West Des Moines, Iowa. And it was brutal. It wasn't so much that the work itself was brutal because, as you know, when you're running a business for yourself, you're signing up to tend to work more hours than might you in a full-time job. But I had just felt so drained and very much this can't be my purpose. this can't be the end all be all. And I experienced a lot of emotional highs and lows, which we can certainly unpack that here in this interview. But I just know what I went through. And it's almost like if I can help shed a light and start talking about it, but then also shed a strategy on how to confidently and strategically make that exit, not only from, like I said, the strategy side, but also relating from the emotional standpoint, because there's a lot of emotions and mentality that goes when you quit your job. If I can help someone else do that where they're at in their job, that is my motivation, because I want other women and men as well to taste that freedom of being able to have the autonomy to work when you want, to work from a laptop, to actually know that you can get up in the mornings and really enjoy your routine, that working harder doesn't mean producing more. Actually, it's called working smarter to produce more. All these constructs and limiting beliefs that I had that I want to teach other people and be there's another way. So that was really my driving force of building out She Did It Her Way.
So I love the fact that you said, I just started a podcast. It didn't have any structure. We just kind of just started it, right? Yes. And I just want to say that apparently your podcast has hundreds of thousands of downloads and you're in 40 countries. Is that correct?
Yes. So
wow.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like I kind of got lucky where when blogging started to blogging is definitely, I don't know, when blogging got its everybody's blogging phase, I feel like that now is becoming everybody's podcasting phase. And I think it's great. Choose your medium and how you want to market your business. It's amazing, wonderful. And I think I got lucky because of the time that I got into it, which was 2015, which was still fairly early. I got lucky that the name She Did It Her Way selected me and it just came to me. So from a branding SEO that was amazing. But yeah, I honestly I didn't have a formal plan of this is what I'm going to do. I just knew that I would rather talk to people than to have than to type out and blog. Like that was not energy giving to me. It's not really my strong suit. I can communicate and have a conversation way better than I can do that. And so I was like, okay. And I had a friend at the time that was like in podcasting and sat down with his producer, and he basically gave me an hour of his time to teach me everything he knew. And I was like, okay, I can figure this out. And yeah, that's kind of how it went. I mean, sometimes I listen to the very first episodes, which we have over like 330 at this point, and I'm like, oh gosh, it just really paints a picture of like, just get started, because you're always going to have that rusty beginning, and it's never going to be perfect. Yeah. And I think, it'd be amazing to see what everyone would create if we just got over the fear of like that crappy first draft. So,
for sure. Well, I think that's good advice. The most eloquent people still are hesitant to get started because it's not perfect, or there might not be perfect, and you just have to get over that, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's like, you just can't, and even like one of my favorite quotes is by the late Wayne Dyer, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And so especially when you find yourself in this mental procrastination mode, it's like, how can you change what it is that you're trying to do in order to get you to take action? Like, for example, I just came out with a podcast, Your Way course. I have created outlines. I've created PowerPoints up until this course for the past 2 years, 75% of the way. And then I always get to the last 25% and I talk myself out of it and be like, that's not my lane. It's not gonna be perfect. I have to create all these PowerPoints. But then when I realized, I was like, why do I have to create PowerPoints? Like, I can just do screen shares and I can have a video on me talking and them showing like my screen and all this stuff. And I was like, that sounds way more fun. So changing the way that I looked at it so that the things that I look at changed, and I created it in less than like a week and a half. And I think it's just, if you can change the way that you're like approaching it, you can totally change it, like action wise.
That's awesome. And very, very good advice. So what is the focus of your podcast?
Yeah, so She Did It Her Way. I really like to dive into female entrepreneurship, but more specifically, like having women share their stories of taking their ultimate leap and how they were able to do it strategically and successfully. And then also diving into things specifically as it relates to online marketing. So how do you create courses? How do you take what you do really well and what someone wants your advice on, like, how do you take that and turn it into a coaching program? How are you going to use email marketing to build your email list? So some of those tactics and strategies, because it's really focused on, building an online business and having that location independence. In the beginning though, like, I think just with any business, you kind of start out really wide. And then as you grow, and as I started doing more interviews, I started realizing, okay, what type of business owner did I resonate with, and what type of business owner did my listeners resonate with, and what do they want more of? So it's definitely been a fun journey for that.
When you're doing guest interviews, like, what have been some of your favorite takeaways from those that you have invited to partake in the conversation?
Gosh, there's like so many. I just had an interview and it hasn't launched yet, but this gal, Mariah Cause, and it was after that interview that I recorded a few weeks ago, that she like flips the model on so many different things about like, oh, you should, if you're going to get into online business, you have to start with a group coaching program before you go to an online course. And she's like, F that. Like, you can just go to an online course. Like, you don't need to do that. She's like a multi-seven-figure business owner. And she's just so aligned with who she is and like not afraid to show up that way. And she just really like changed the mold for a lot of different things. So there's her interview, Jen Sincero of You Are a Badass. Hopefully
you interviewed her.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So she came on like a few years ago. So that was a really cool experience because I had read her book, and someone else that I was on their podcast and they're on mine had connected me with her. So that was a really cool experience. I'm trying, like, Amy Porterfield was awesome. She came on, and then Rachel Hollis was on the podcast, oh gosh, like a year and a half ago, before I think her first book came out. So those were just really exciting opportunities. But I think the one common theme that I see among all of them is like recognizing and being self-aware of what it is that you do so you can move beyond your own traps. So if you don't know what you don't know, then you can't really do a whole lot about it. But the more you become self-aware of the habits and things that you're doing, the more empowered you are to be able to change them and also move beyond them, and especially the things that are blocking you and stopping you.
So with that, so is your mission is to help people kind of harness the ability to have a job outside of a job, right? Create their own business and persona.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just mentioned having the ability to self-reflect on things that may be holding you back. What are some of the things that held you back in the beginning that you've kind of been able to work through?
That's a really good question. One of the big things that held me back was I had always considered myself a fairly confident person. No fear. I can take on a lot of risk. But there was a moment that I almost shied away from wanting to have the capacity to lead people. And once I started stepping into that leadership role, I saw my capacity for people to come in and to coach, and whether that was the podcast growing, whether that's courses selling, whether that's creating courses and things like that, that was a really big thing. And that was, I never thought I had a lot of imposter syndrome, but I realized in a very indirect way that I was buffering myself because of imposter syndrome and because of this perfection of, not wanting to launch a course until it's perfect, and you have to create the perfect webinar and things, perfect PowerPoints, and then realizing that, just again, do the same things that I coach other people on, and that would be great, right? We're always so good at giving advice, but then when it actually comes to taking our own advice, which I have read, there's something in the brain that stops that. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, take my own advice. So that would definitely be one of them.
Awesome. So let's talk about how to start a podcast.
Yes. You want to go from the way beginning?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Ooh, this is so good because it's fresh in my mind. I think, the first thing and if anyone's thinking about launching a podcast, you have to get really clear on what the purpose is, because a lot of people that I've talked to that have asked me questions, it's usually their goal in their mind is create a podcast, make money. And the way that they want to do it is through sponsors. I encourage them to think differently, where yes, you can make money with sponsors. Typically it takes a decent amount of downloads. And so that time to build that download listenership could take years. And instead of doing that, instead of relying on sponsorships, which is outside of your business, because sponsorships could go away, it's a very reactive approach. Where I always encourage people to look at the strategy, because your podcast is a marketing medium, and how are you leveraging that? And so one of the things that I wish I would have done in the early days, again, it was a hobby, I had zero formal plan, was really say, okay, how can I take that time, that 30 seconds at the beginning of the episode, and use that commercial or that 30 seconds for products and services of my own, like an opt-in, a freebie, right? Versus using that space and holding out for money. So I always encourage, one, look at the strategy and that your podcast and how is it helping grow your business, but also make money in your business. And so when you look at the actual podcast content itself, always have a call to action. So something like if you listen to She Did It Her Way, I have a call to action of where you can sign up for the Ultimate Leap Suite checklist and starter kit. And so that is at the front of every episode. Now it wasn't that way. I actually went through and edited over 100 episodes of podcast episodes to put that insert in there. But now when you get people on your email list, you're creating a dialogue. It's not just this vanity metric, and you wouldn't want to look at it a vanity metric because some people have 50,000 people, but as far as how they're nurturing them and are they the right people, that doesn't matter. You can have a very small list in terms of 500 people and still make a 5-figure launch. So being strategic in the sense of how am I getting the people who are listening to the podcast on my email list, and using it as a way to do a call to action for your freebie, and then also create content that is in alignment with your business. I started the podcast first and then the business second. And it definitely, I keep saying, I encourage people to really think about, okay, if you're starting a podcast and you don't really have a business quite yet, let's think about how how the podcast is part of the business, but the podcast isn't the business. So that's the first thing, is like getting very clear on the strategy. Then it comes down to simple things of, what's the name of it? What's your description? Who's your ideal listener avatar? And it most likely follows up with who your ideal customer avatar is, which then can help you understand who your ideal guest avatar is. So you want to make sure that you're like, there's a kind of in a relation of product market fit, there's a listener guest fit, if you will. So you wouldn't want to have someone on your show or talk about a solo cast that isn't content that your listeners really care about. So that's sort of the foundation. I'm happy to go into the tech side if that would be helpful. You let me know.
I'll lead to the tech side in just a moment. So,
okay, perfect.
Year one, you kind of just started. What was your goal? What was your goal for the podcast? Do you even remember?
No, I mean, I don't, it's embarrassing to say. I don't think I had one. It was just how people will start blogs, or I think of fashion blogs, and they do it as a hobby because it's a creative outlet. This was my creative outlet. It was a way for me to feel like it was something of my own. Because even though I was doing subcontract work and I loved it and I was traveling everywhere, it felt like the contract work was the actual companies that I was subcontracting. It wasn't my work, and I wanted something that was mine. And that's why I started the podcast. So in year one, from 2015 to 2016, it was still clunky, one episode a week, didn't really care about batching, wasn't super serious about it. And then in 2016, I started recognizing that there was a real opportunity, and I started doing 2 episodes a week, and we started growing, and I actually started looking at numbers. Whereas before, I didn't even open up my metric board because I'm like, oh, this is fun. I don't really care about that. And then in 2017, I hosted the first annual She Did It Her Way Summit. And that was really one of the first ways that I guess you could say that I monetized She Did It Her Way. I held an event, planned it in 3 months, had 35 women from 11 different countries fly in. And it was it was pretty awesome. I mean, I love in-person events. I think there's definitely a value add with it, just because so much is online, and that's great. But having the personal connection in person is awesome too. And I like running events. So did that. And then 2018 was a crazy year. But I have VAs that work under me, virtual assistants. And I launched a monthly membership program. I launched 2 group programs. I launched an online course. I just threw so much stuff against the wall. It was the most uncomfortable I had ever been, because at that point I still wasn't very clear on where's my niche and where is my lane. Mm-hmm. And that is such a crucial point, because I think a lot of people, and including myself for a time there, I was so nervous and so uncomfortable to test out all these things and to take massive action, partly because I was like, I feel like I should have this figured out by now. But that thought was keeping me stuck from actually growing, because I had this expectation that I should be somewhere by now. And I think a lot of people have that. And that's why I'm sharing this, is because it's a very humbling thing to admit the fact that you don't have it all figured out, and nobody does. And so that 2018 was messy, massive action. I also learned that I needed to come inward to really sit with what's going on inside and listen, versus just do, go, mm-hmm. where we can get in this hustle mentality, but if we don't actually create space, we can't allow for things to come in. And so 2019 has been a really cool, definitely mellowed year, but much more in an alignment year, and really have honed in on that woman who is listening, who has a skill set that is in this job that she's like, what the heck? There's got to be more out there, feeling super conflicted inside, and wants to be able to take what she does in corporate and do it on her own, and knows exactly what she wants to do, and is ready to find clients and basically do what I did. So that's where the sweet spot comes in and take action.
Alignment. I appreciate your honesty about, kind of the evolution of where you've come from. In coming into alignment for this year, what's the aha? I thought I had to do it this way, but I actually can let that go. What is that?
Everything. It's so funny. I'm very big in astrology, and I'm a double Capricorn. So a typical Capricorn is a very CEO, like very rigid, very follows the rules by the book, like plans, sometimes probably over plans, wants everything to have a purpose, wants everything to be in order, wants to have control, wants to move pieces, all this stuff. And so what I had found though is that that type of mentality and that type of characteristics was no longer serving me, because it felt so much like I was just efforting, because I'm like, no, this is how it should be. You should be grinding it out. This is what having your own business. If you're not grinding it out, if you're not working, how are you going to make six figures? How are you going to make multiple six figures? And then I was also, if I'm around other people that are that way, I'm really good at taking on like being a chameleon. So I had to become aware of that. Oh, by me being in this environment, I'm actually taking on this person's work ethic. And ultimately, I just have to find my lane of what feels good to me. And what I've found is that I used to be someone who would just schedule her calendar and overload it and be like, oh, I have a free week. What am I going to schedule here? I have a free month. Like after I got done doing a 3-day summit with 100 women, I was like, okay, what's next? Like, let's keep going. And it's like, no, dude, slow down. And so I really had to learn turning off that lever and sitting through the discomfort of just being. And it was discomfort for me because I'd never done that before. And once I had done that, the other side of recognizing like, oh man, there's like ways that you can work more in flow. You get intuitive hits about what you should be doing, what you shouldn't, like what's not a good fit, what feels fun versus what you think like, I need to plan this entire launch and it's got to be planned in detail versus like what feels fun in the moment, what actually, and I would never imagine that I'd be sitting here talking about that on a podcast because I am so typically type A that is the big aha for 2019 of learning to let go. Like, yes, there still needs to be planning, but not, how do I not be so rigid that there's no room for magic or fun? So
I love that. I am of similar personality type as you are. And often I'll get that tough question of like, well, exactly what's your vision here? What's your strategy? And I'm like, it feels good. Like I have to go with that, right? Yeah. Like I don't know what it's going to be, and that's okay.
Yeah. And you just, I mean, sometimes just knowing that you're like, I'm going to make a freaking impact on this world is enough. And you know, sometimes we can feel challenged by other people's questions, even though that might not be their intention. I know I certainly have, right? Feeling like if I go to a networking event, people don't really understand what I do. It's a little like, oh, a lot of energy. And then what are you doing trying to poke holes? And they're not trying to poke holes. It's just they're curious because their brain doesn't necessarily understand. But that was really, really the big thing of just like relaxing instead of gripping it so tightly and trying to force things where, especially being in an environment where everybody's like, oh, if you're not working 10 hours a day, then you don't want it enough. Or if you're taking a vacation, you don't want it enough, which is crazy because you need to rest.
For sure.
Athletes rest. Come on.
So since 2015, so how have you stayed motivated to build your audience? Like what do you do?
Ooh, gosh. So that I think kind of comes with, I look at metrics and I look at numbers and I look at what podcast episodes do well, but more so instead of looking at numbers, I have learned it's kind of like, let me go back to this as an example of, I used to work in call centers. So some of the contract work that I used to do in call centers, and the coaches would just run up and down the aisles, well, walk, but they'd be like, I need 2 more cell phone sales. I need 2 more direct TVs. I need 2 more. So they're stating what they want as the outcome, but they're not actually focused on what's going to change the outcome, which is the behavior. And so for a while for me, I was so focused on the outcome of the numbers and less focused on what is going to actually influence them. Where when I stopped focusing so much on like, how much am I making every month and and yes, it's very important. Like you need to know those numbers, but instead of focusing so intensely on those numbers and the downloads, I looked at what am I doing that actually impacts them. And as long as I'm staying close to my target audience, I'm listening and asking questions, I'm producing great content, all of that then helps me decide like, what do they need in terms of coaching? What do they need in terms of like, what are they asking for in terms of a course, the podcast course that I have? that came out of multiple people asking me. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to create a course, because that way you guys can see everything that I do, including the behind the scenes of my own. So that has definitely been way more fruitful than trying to grind it out and guess what I think that they want. Plus it also, I got in the, it's kind of going back to the email marketing, where just because you have so many thousands, hundreds of thousands of downloads, that's not as important as how are you actually serving them and giving them the next step. That's way more important than just, oh, we've got 1 million downloads for the sake of 1 million downloads. I think that might not be everyone. But I also am not wanting to be big on, again, having sponsorships. Like, yes, if your numbers grow, you can have more sponsors, but I definitely am different. So, yeah.
Okay. I am curious. You've covered a lot of different aspects, but what would be like the top 5 tips you'd give to someone, an entrepreneur, a future entrepreneur who would be considering starting a podcast?
Ooh, let's see. 5, 3, that would be starting a podcast. 1, going back to what is your strategy?
Okay.
2, define what actually is your business.
Okay.
So even if you don't know what your business is at this moment, but you know that ultimately the podcast is going to be the marketing piece of it, go in with the lens of what is the business. And then 3 would be to batch your work, whether you're doing interviews or solo cast. And if you're not familiar with batching, it's basically sitting down for a 4-hour chunk and doing as much of the same task as you possibly can, versus sitting down multiple times doing different tasks, because every time you have to switch, you actually waste energy switching. So that's batching. I think is that number 3 or number 4?
That was number 3. I'm writing it down.
Number 3. Yes. So batching. Batching. Number 4 would be making sure that you obviously, I mean, I think this goes without saying, but making sure that you're sharing it on social media, because you have spent so much time and energy in producing such amazing content that you want to make sure that you are having a follow-up system to that. I actually have 6. Number 5 is the way, even the strategy that you get on other people's podcasts. There's like a whole like strategy. So what I would say for that is, instead of just wanting to get on a podcast for sake of getting on a podcast, be really smart. Go back to who's my ideal customer listener or customer avatar, but also my ideal listener, right? And then go on iTunes or go on any of these other networks and search for different podcasts that are in alignment with that. And then figure out what is their submission process to go on to their show. And again, you also, while you're on that show, something I did not do in the beginning was I did not take advantage of going on other people's shows. And there were some shows that like had major market, like major listeners, and I left them hanging. I didn't have any sort of call to action. I'm just like, oh my gosh, that was crazy. Like, why didn't I have that? So you also want to have a call to action when you go on someone else's podcast, because these are potentially new listeners, potentially new customers, and you want to be able to start that dialogue. Number 6 is create as many templates and processes as possible in the production process, because there are so many moving parts. So I use Asana, which I love. What do you guys use?
What are we using?
For
like our processing? Yep.
Yeah.
I don't think
Excel.
Yeah.
You guys, you gotta get on Asana. Yeah. Okay. Get on Asana. So I have it's a Scale Your Way course, and it's I was just thinking it's 5 modules, and I basically teach you how to set up Asana for your business hub. So this is part of the other Capricorn. I love systems and processes because it's definitely helped me able to focus on the parts of my business that I need to focus on in like content creation and vision and stuff, versus emailing, coordinating, production, all that stuff. My VAs do it. And so it's really like, especially in podcasts, such a heavy moving pieces and parts. Number 6 would be making sure you get your workflows in order.
Okay.
So otherwise you will burn yourself out. And I remember in the beginning too, if anyone's listening, like thinking, okay, well, I'm just the one that's doing the podcast. Do I really need to put a workflow in? Yes, you do. Because here's the deal. As soon as you get clear on every single exact step that you need to take in a process, you then see, okay, what templates do I need to create? When does this need to be done? Where's the potential bottleneck? And then once you identify that, then you're more confident on, oh, okay, these are the parts that I need to actually outsource. So then you move to the next step of training and finding someone. So yes. And Asana is free as long as you use your, it's free. You can use your personal email or you can use your business email, but you want to use your business email because that actually unlocks certain features that you want to get in your personal Asana dashboard.
That is a good tip.
Yes.
I'm going to dig deeper on this one because I feel like you just gave us your something you wish you'd known sooner. And so I'm just going to take Asana as a bonus.
Yes. Let's do it.
Is there anything else that you wish you'd known sooner?
In business or podcasting?
In podcasting.
I'm trying to think now. What do I wish I would have known sooner? I think, I don't know if I would have known sooner, but I had a learning lesson in February of this year of 2019. So when She Did It Her Way was originally set up, there was actually, it was set up. I didn't do the setting up. That was someone else on the team at the time. And I don't know if she set it up or it was hired, and it's not a big deal at all. But what I had learned is one morning I woke up in February and we got kicked off iTunes, and I was like, WTF, what the heck? And this is Thursday morning. And if you are on iTunes, there's no place that you can call in. It's all ticket service orders. So you have to email them. And I had got kicked off, and they send you this email and they say it could be a list of these things. Okay. And so you're trying to read coding, and I'm not a developer, but I think I'm pretty good at understanding things, but I was still struggling. I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck's going on? We got to get back up there. So through the process, our files that were feeding from our hosting site were too big. So iTunes didn't like that. I had the author as She Did It Her Way, not me. And then if you put too many keywords in your titles, iTunes will pick up on that and they will kick you off because of that. So because it's an SEO platform, basically, it's a search engine. And so if they feel like you're trying to take advantage of it and punch in a bunch of keywords, they will recognize that and knock you off. Now, but here's the kicker. Probably a week before that, I had someone reach out to me and tell me that they could only access a previous 100 episodes on iTunes. And I'm like, that is so weird. Then to come to find out that actually, so there's a hosting site, which I use Simplecast. I love them. What they do is you upload everything to the hosting site, and then you have an RSS feed that you then upload to Spotify, to iTunes, to all like Google Podcasts, all these other places. But the RSS feed that was being fed to iTunes was actually coming from Squarespace. So Squarespace has their own podcasting hosting site. And yes, it's free, but I promise you paying the $15 per month to have an agnostic third-party hosting site is way worth it, because here's what happened. When you change the RSS feed to iTunes, it changes everything. I lost all my reviews. I lost everything. No. But I really feel it's a silver lining, because that was part of the process that I was a little unclear about, but to me, it was a working process. So I'm like, I'm not going to fix it. But now I'm actually more excited to teach people about podcasting and to share that story, because I don't want anyone else to experience it. So that would have been one of the things, was, just get set up. And Libsyn's also a really popular one. Again, I can't speak to them because I haven't used them, but I really loved Simplecast. They were amazing during the entire iTunes fiasco. They would check in on me to make sure that I was okay. And I'm like, yes, partly crying, but frustrated, but yes. I mean, that also made me realize it doesn't matter how many listeners you have if you're not creating that conversation off the mic. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it's important to invite people to come to your email list. So creating opt-ins like the Ultimate Leap Suite, or the Ultimate Leap starter kit and checklist guide, things like that.
You've mentioned that. I'm just curious, are you willing to share how many downloads you've had of that particular call to action?
That one, since I started, so I signed up for Amy Porterfield's list building course. I always wanted, now I think she changed it to List Building Society, actually. So I signed up for that at the end of the year, because I had not been at all actively on the pod, growing the email list. It has just about tripled since I've gone through and I've actually taken action of creating freebies, looking at my core offer is what she calls it. Going back into all the episodes. This is another thing that I did was I went back, I started with the top 10 downloaded episodes. Mm-hmm. And I went back and I cleaned them up. So I edited the audio, took anything out that had time sensitive information. So if it talked about the She Did It Her Way Summit from 2018, I was like, nope, we're deleting that. And then we're putting the opt-in right up front. So I did that with the top 10 downloaded episodes. I did that with the top blog posts that were visited on the website. I did that with the And then I did it with any episode that had a call to action that was no longer irrelevant. So it ended up being close to, I think, about 100 episodes. Wow. And I could see that was like a huge game changer. Now there's a call to action in every show note. There is a call to action on Instagram. There's a call to action on the website. And so I just wasn't, I kind of, emailing, now we're kind of moving away from podcasting, but I hope it's okay. Emailing was one of those things where I'm just like, ooh, I don't really yeah, it's fine. I can build a business without email. And it's like, what, girl? No. I mean, yes, you can, but that wouldn't be a smart business, at least now in hindsight. And I say that because I did that. I didn't do emailing. I was like, I don't have to do that stuff. But once it's you move past I was pole vaulting over mouse turds. I was making emailing like such this big thing. And in reality, if you just set the timer for 30 minutes on your phone and committed to playing around, which I use ConvertKit, playing around in ConvertKit, and you didn't have any hard expectations that you had to figure it out and you just had fun, it'd be such a delightful experience. And I mean, the sooner you get started, the sooner you get started. So it definitely, I always look at so there's an onboarding sequence. So when you sign up for the core opt-in, this guide that I have, you're in a 4-day email sequence where I share my story, I tell you a little bit about like the top downloaded podcast episodes about quitting your job. And then I actually have an email that I'm like, okay, enough about me. I want to hear about you. Tell me about you. And I get so much engagement from that. It's incredible. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I could go on for days. So you just tell me.
And I could let you.
Yeah.
So I just want to confirm, you were saying, you're doing this on your own, but you use a lot of virtual assistants. Do you have any other core people part of your team that people should be thinking about as building this as a model?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I don't think it's never too early to start outsourcing. As long as you've laid the foundation, it's never too early. If you are working a full-time job and there's things that you're doing in your business, whether it's blogging, proofreading, or anything that can be outsourced for 3 hours a week, do it. That's 3 hours that you don't have to take on the stress. You don't have to necessarily do those things. You can work on your business. So it's never too early to outsource. Number one is the way I coach people in processes is just get a blank sheet of paper and think about something. So think about a production process for podcasting and just write out every tiny, there you go, tiny thing that you have to do in order to get from start to finish. Then go back and actually order them and say, okay, this goes first, this goes second, this goes third. Then you've got this nice list. Then you go to Asana and you create a template because you're gonna be doing it over and over. And if you create a template, then all you have to do is just go to the 3 dots and click new template. So that is the biggest thing. And then when you go to look for virtual assistants, ask people in your network. They typically have people like I've referred. So I have 3 VAs, 4 VAs, 2 that are in the Philippines, 1 that's in India, and then I have 1 that is stateside. And so the one, Jennifer, is stateside. So her role is to manage the inbox of the general inbox. She manages my calendar. She is kind of like that gatekeeper for me in that sense. And then she does like a lot of the high level front facing stuff. And then Kim, Mark, and my other gentleman, they all do sort of like proofreading, production, social media management, things like that. And they are amazing. Like we Voxer, they're in Slack, they're fantastic. And they're just so eager. They're so like, all of them are so eager and so excited. So definitely, I mean, ask for referrals, go inside Facebook groups that are really geared towards virtual assistants. You can find people that way. You can find people on Fiverr. You can find them on Upwork. The other big thing, the last thing I'll say for a piece of advice is be really clear on the directions of training, which is, I call it, it's a skills transfer process. I think a lot of times people think that, if I just tell someone what to do, they know what I'm doing. They know what I'm thinking about. And there's and it happened a lot when I would do coaching, is that in corporate, where a lot of the leaders would be like, well, no, I told them what to do. Now they should just know it, right? Well, no, I'm sorry, but I don't want to get on a plane where a pilot just learned what to do, but didn't actually practice and do it with someone there. And then you flew him out. Like, no. So we can't expect virtual assistants or people on our team to know exactly what we want them to do without actually having a skills transfer process and following up and giving them feedback and asking if they have any questions. That would be the last piece of that.
Such good advice, especially even if, regardless of whether they're virtual or not, it has to happen when you have someone in front of you, and we miss that even when we're together. So
Yeah, because you think like you're just like, oh yeah, they know what I'm talking about. I'm like,
right, they may not.
And then it causes rework, and then you get frustrated, and you're like, my VA isn't doing what she needs to be doing. I'm like, well, did you train them?
Right, exactly.
So.
I've got a few quick questions. I want some more intel. I would love for you to share with my listeners. What resources on your site do you have for people who might be interested in starting a podcast? Like, where should they go to find more information?
Yes, I'm just pulling this up here. So, they can find, if they go to She Did It Her Way. So 2 things. If you're like, I want to do the course, I'm all in, you can go to shedititherwaypodcast.com/podcast your way.
Okay.
So that is the course. If you're like, not entirely ready for the course, I kind of want to check this girl out. On the main page, if you scroll down, there is a podcast checklist launch guide, which I can also send to you if you want that as well.
That would be amazing. I'd love to include that.
Oh yeah, I will send that. And let's see. Or you can just go over to the resources guide, and there, the podcast checklist and launch guide is right there too.
Okay. So if my listeners were going to go to one particular podcast, which one would you point them to first to just like knock their socks off?
I would point you to episode 268 with Julie Ciardi, who I love. 268. Let me make sure that is the correct episode. She came to my first event so Corporate America to Six-Figure Entrepreneur in less than 4 months with Julie Ciardi. She came to my first event in the summit in 2017. She's from the East Coast. She's this like vivacious like mom, and she worked in corporate at a technology company. She was VP, that level. And she goes, I'm not happy. Her and her family downsized their home to make a smaller mortgage payment. She then decided built her business, which was a brick and mortar boutique on the side of her full-time job. And then in 4 months hit 6 figures. She left her corporate job, and now she actually just sold her brick and mortar, and she's on to coaching moms and building the business beyond that. And that episode gets so many downloads. And I think it should, because it's such a beautiful story about how to strategically make the leap. And I love it because she did this, she had a really big full-time career. She had kids, she didn't have any excuses. She's just like, you just got to do it. It's just a beautiful episode, and Julie's amazing. So that I would definitely recommend people go listen to that one.
Oh, that is fantastic. Amanda, I just can't thank you enough for spending some time with me here today. I am excited to share what you have going on and get this launched. And thank you for the wealth of information you've shared.
Yeah, thank you. This was an absolute pleasure.
Oh, fantastic. We have Amanda Boelyn, who is the CEO of She Did It Her Way. Check her out online. Thank you.